Faster than the speed of light, Halo 4's campaign transitions from the sublime to the downright ridiculous. Hot on the heels of the campaign's best level comes one of the series' worst, Shutdown, an aptly named experience as it always makes me want to turn off my computer. Shutdown begins with Cortana monologuing about an artificial sun and the nature of being alive, no doubt prompted by worries regarding her own mortality.
But for all that, I'll never actually know if it looks real, if it feels real. Before this is all over, promise me you'll figure out which one of us is the machine.
At the end of Reclaimer, Cortana struggled to contain her emotions, and while they are now under control, it's obvious how much her outburst has affected her. She has been pragmatic about her condition from minute one, but now it seems the reality of the situation has truly set in. Master Chief remains indifferent, awkwardly fiddling with his assault rifle in the background. At surface level, Chief is man and Cortana machine, but how uncomfortable and emotional Cortana makes the Spartan serves to blur the line between the two. Part of his unwillingness to engage, I'm sure, also stems from his continued belief that a solution to the problem can and hopefully will be found, or him being in denial. After a brief exchange with Lasky, you enter a hangar housing the Pelican he's prepared for you, and there is a surprising amount of detail packed into this one area if you take the time to have a good look around. Along with regular announcements over the tannoy, including one from Captain Del Rio, there are several terminals you can interact with, and a lot of Marines, Spartan 4's and the like who react to your presence. Their dialogue is fantastic, and while there are far too many examples to list them all, I will highlight a couple. One of my favourites is mention of another Spartan.
I spotted for a Class 2 back in 39. 0058. You know her? She was an absolute beast with a sniper.
If you are someone well acquainted with series lore, you'll recognise 058 as the number for Linda, a very special Spartan who is a member of Blue Team led by Master Chief. The strangest of them all is chatter between two very ordinary looking workers nearby.
I think something's up.
What?
I think there's gonna be a war with an alien they awoke from an ancient slumber.
Oh, that is stupid.
I know.
I mean, I don't know much. I mostly just load crates, but that is stupid.
You know what? There's one thing my grandpa told me. Never awaken an alien from an ancient slumber.
I only found out recently, but the pair are voiced by US TV host Conan O'Brien and his longtime collaborator Andy Richter. Speaking of secrets, you can take this opportunity to go on a rampage if you're feeling mischievous. The concept is nothing new, you can choose to slaughter your allies whenever you want in any Halo title, but it's somewhat different on this occasion as it's a chance to test your mettle against fellow Spartans, albeit Spartan 4's, as waves of reinforcements are sent in to take you down. Towards the end of the battle in the original release, Sergeant Johnson would sometimes spawn to thwart you, but I've been reliably informed that he no longer appears under any circumstances in the Master Chief collection. Of course, the prospect of flying a Pelican means you might ignore the interesting conversations, decide not to go rogue, and rush straight through the hangar to the vehicle, and who could blame you? After all, the game's lineup of vehicles is desperately anemic, with many favourites missing and only the Mantis and Pelican added, so the Pelican is a rare treat, a potential diamond buried in 4's fairly rough vehicular landscape. This isn't its first appearance as a pilotable vehicle in Halo per se. An Easter egg in Reach's New Alexandria also allows a Pelican to be flown, but it is the first time it's part of a campaign proper. Taking off is certainly exciting, and the setup for the rest of Shutdown sounds promising too.
Contact. Didact dead ahead.
How do we get inside those shields?
Marking 2 of the larger facilities on your HUD. They're acting as traffic control for resources moving to and from the satellite. If we disrupt their communications, I can forge an override code and convince it to lower those defenses.
With forerunner structures hanging in mid-air against the clouds and the Didact's cryptum floating menacingly in the distance, the unusual premise and striking backdrop will likely be more than enough to foster a sense of anticipation, the feeling that you're about to play something noteworthy. Unfortunately, the action in question isn't altogether brilliant. In fact, massively disappointing is a more apt description. When it comes to the Pelican, there are two main sources of frustration, the vehicle itself and the way the mission is structured. Let's talk about what it's like to use use it while travelling to the first tower. In short, piloting the Pelican is desperately uninteresting. For starters, there is no challenge involved in manoeuvring it whatsoever, with it handling similarly to Halo 3 ODST's Banshee. It has no forward momentum without your interference, which means if you take your hands off the wheel, so to speak, it will hover in place, trivialising combat to an absurd degree. You needn't do more than strafe left and right while aiming. Even if you do somehow struggle to handle it, and I genuinely do not see how that could happen, the encounters you face are also about as uninspiring as they could possibly be. A number of phantoms float near the entrance to your destination, and they provide basically no resistance at all, shooting but rarely bothering to do much else. Honestly, I felt more danger climbing out of bed. You do have a machine gun and a Spartan laser you can dish out damage with, but neither offers anything unique, with the result being that you tend to sit back mindlessly blasting away, brain barely switched on, until the incredibly listless Covenant forces have all met their maker. It's enough to make you want to attack the Didact head-on in a vain attempt to find some fun. That is a decision that won't end too well, however. Heading inside the first of the two facilities you need to tackle, Cortana's issues continue.
This tower's directing traffic to the Didact satellite through a carrier wave generator located somewhere inside. Of course, if Infinity wasn't on its way back to Earth, locating and disabling it would be trivial.
We can handle it.
That's hardly the point, is it?
And this section is rubbish. If you are an avid watcher of my channel, or maybe even a disinterested one, you might have heard me speak before of my intense, burning hatred of Halo 2's gondolas and assorted slow-moving platforms. There is a reason they are present everywhere in 2 and then pretty much nowhere else after, and that is because they are terrible. 343 Industries clearly didn't entirely agree though. I actually don't hate the design of the two arenas on either side you're forced to disembark to along the way, as they offer space and verticality which are both perfect for the jetpack you begin the level equipped with. That being said, you've just indulged in a dreary Pelican section, then you've had to sit on a slow-moving platform, and now you have to fight through two practically identical sections which are extremely visually repetitive. The Pelican, I think, is meant to act as a break between the various towers, but because it's not at all enjoyable, you end up with different types of boredom being stacked upon one another. Infinity and Reclaimer Prior are action-packed and varied throughout, and Shutdown then brings you back down to Earth with a very hard bump. By the time you reach the carrier wave generator, you'll be more than ready to do anything else, but you first have to step into it so that Master Chief's shield can emit an EMP to disrupt it. I'm always reminded of Combat Evolved's 2 Betrayals when playing Shutdown, particularly while visiting this tower. In 2 Betrayals, you're also introduced to a new vehicle, although you can pilot it earlier if you know how, and you then have to journey to multiple locations to take down phase pulse generators using your shields. Once or twice when you do so, sentinels will immediately appear prior to your shields recharging to make life hell. Guess what happens in this tower after doing the same thing? That's right, Watchers appear immediately prior to your shields recharging to make life hell. When the Watchers have been dealt with, you are rewarded with a ride all the way back to where you started. Oh, joy of joys.
The mantle of responsibility for the galaxy shelters all human, but only the Forerunners are its masters.
Cortana, where's this coming from?
Where's what coming from?
The Didact's voice.
I'm not picking up anything, Chief.
He's there. Keep trying.
Back in the Pelican, Tower number 2 awaits, as does another mid-air skirmish which is exactly the same as the last one. This is the second problem with how Shutdown uses the Pelican, or rather, how it doesn't. Even while preparing to move on to pastures new, Bungie continued to innovate as they worked on Halo Reach. One of my favourite examples is New Alexandria, a very unique proposition. You had to fly between 3 different locations and disable communications jammers at each, with the order sometimes changing between playthroughs, and you had to complete various side objectives which were selected randomly from a pool of 12. Set against a city in ruins the Covenant continues to glass, it is one of the most memorable missions in the series. The only thing Shutdown shares with New Alexandria is that it also features a beautiful setting and that you have to visit 3 different locations. While there is some choice, the order you take on the first 2 towers is up to you, that's as unique as proceedings get. When playing New Alexandria, you never quite know what is coming next, as you race to destroy the jammers and complete side objectives while everything burns around you. It's dynamic, it's haunting, and most importantly, it's entertaining. When playing Shutdown, you fly to each tower, take part in short-lived dogfights, and that's it. There are so many ways 343 could have improved things. Perhaps you had to pick up troops and ferry them into battle, perhaps a few other Pelicans joined you for bigger firefights. Hell, even some Covenant ground troops guarding each entrance would have made events slightly more engaging. It's such a frustrating thing to witness, as the potential is near limitless. 343 had a blank slate to utilise as they saw fit. Instead, what we get is the absolute bare minimum, which makes the Pelican's grand entrance about as depressing as it could possibly be. Entering the second tower, you've another job to do.
Chief, there's a lot more comm traffic passing through this tower than just what's servicing the Didact satellite. These systems use data attenuators to regulate the flow of communications. Destroying those would drown out the tower's transmissions. The tower's instructions to the Didact's shield would be drowned in yours.
This area is arguably worse than the last, although opinion will vary. It's another case of 343 making you do the same thing multiple times to solve a larger problem, although in fairness it's not the worst example included in Halo 4. That dubious honour goes to Forerunner and its power cores, with you having to destroy what begins to feel like a never-ending parade of them. It's something included in every 343 developed Halo title, and it is always awful. Like the first tower, again, there's nothing egregious about the combat you indulge in, but it is, in my mind, by far the worst example of how visually cluttered Halo 4's Forerunner environments can become. I'm going to pause the footage for a second now to show you exactly what I mean. Look at this scene. The ramp in the bottom left is visible enough, as is the walkway and accompanying crawlers in the bottom right. Trying to discern how everything beyond them connects and can be traversed even when looking at a still image is a tough task. You can make out individual segments, but even that is tricky. Now imagine trying to navigate all of it with speed and accuracy, especially the first time you arrive here. Then throw in enemies who practically blend into the background. It's like the Flood in Halo 3's Cortana all over again, except this time with the colour grey. Say what you want about the stark, brutalist design of Forerunner architecture in earlier titles, the makeup of your immediate environment is usually obvious. Granted, you can still get lost exploring the wider map. The Silent Cartographer is the one that always leaves me in a muddle, but it's not overly difficult figuring out how everything directly in front of you combines. With larger areas like those in 4 comes an increase in complexity, no one can deny that, but consequently extra care should be put into helping you understand their layout. I'd go so far as to say that 343's Forerunner aesthetic often serves to do the exact opposite. As you move at speed, everything blurs together to create a visual catastrophe, an unappealing grey mess which is usually a nightmare to navigate. Back on board the Pelican, Master Chief and Cortana race towards the third and final tower as a defiant Didact prepares to leave Requiem.
Do you truly believe these theatrics can prevent my departure? Embrace your sad fate and retain your nobility. I am already beyond you.
He knows what we're trying to do. If we try to get too close to that ship, we're dead. I have an idea. Head for that waypoint.
The concluding on-foot affair after is Shutdown's best, thanks to its simplicity. Unsurprisingly, it features only Covenants with not a Promethean in sight, and it's easy to navigate, which at this stage is a godsend. Each portion of the area is laid out in a way which straight away makes sense thanks to how they're separated, in stark contrast to that discussed a minute or two ago. I also want to give a shout out to the music, as the track This Armor which plays here is one of the best on the soundtrack. It's urgent and alien in equal measure, and could not fit this segment any better. Unfortunately, I can't play it, as including in-game clips or backing tracks using Neil Davidge's portion of the soundtrack has resulted in several copyright claims. Flying around in a Banshee after I like well enough too. Mostly it's a retread of what you've just been through at ground level, except you're able to take to the sky. Despite it not being anything special in and of itself, it is considerably more riveting than any moment spent flying around earlier, which is less praise for this part, and more a damning indictment of 343's use of the Pelican. Shutdown ends on a high note at least. Although Cortana had managed to pull herself together by the time the mission's opening rolled around, here she again loses control.
They're mine. Now to imprison them!
What are you doing?
Like him, isn't his Prometheus? Like Dr. Halsey imprisoned me!
And as the Didact begins his escape, Chief launches himself into mid-air in pursuit, something of a series staple.
Cortana, what's happening?
I don't know. Hang on!
Shutdown's predominant colour is grey, and that is very appropriate, as its gameplay experience as a whole is mind-numbingly dull. Once past the admittedly interesting hangar housing the Pelican, it all goes downhill at staggering pace, starting with the vehicle itself. It's an extraordinarily disappointing introduction to a vehicle which has been part of the series since the start, and deserved more fanfare. The on-foot adventures which punctuate your flights aren't any better either, an awful mishmash of samey content, aesthetically disastrous environments and repetitive objectives. Shutdown is a level which absolutely deserves to sit high on the relatively small list of Halo stinkers, an abhorrent affair that offers nearly nothing of note. In the interest of balance, I must admit that its opening and closing cinematics are wonderful, and I suppose they do take the edge off a laborious middle somewhat. Even so, the mission as a whole is the dictionary definition of monotonous. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you enjoyed it, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, and fingers crossed, we'll meet again soon.